Hello everyone. I would like to begin with our first step into the exploration of the mind of a sage. And it's not me or anyone else, it's the concept of a sage and the concept of a wise man. The concept of what is wisdom in this generation, in this time, in this space, in this consideration of realness. And we find that life has many things to tell us. And much of our own understanding is actually blended in with the understanding of others. And the stories that our awareness has allowed for our minds to create. So you see, man's ability to recognize a story and associate with it has increased, has evolved. In other words, the monkey no longer sees the same branches, doesn't see the same life form. In other words, we are self-aware, and that has a lot of meaning. However, what I am telling you is, when you have self-awareness, you're in a sense aware of your cause based on the amount of activity of your practice. And so the way your practice works suggests how much creativity and imagination you're allowing yourself to find to be real. And what we understand that in the world, where dreamers may walk among awakened men, we find realities to be different. So when you're around others, you understand the value and the importance of communicating accurately, solidly, in a sense being able to communicate. But on other levels of understanding, when you're internally present within your own silent gaze, there is no other understanding that you need rather than the activity of the exploration. In other words, before concept shaped you too hard, you were the excitement of wondrous passage, of action, of activity, of the moment presenting itself. You're always the moment presenting itself when you're in that moment or when you're around any moment. And we see that it is a self-awareness of self. In other words, the man who can take off his sense of self just like his coat. That is quite the profundity. Because life is built based on the rules of the tongue. And when we follow the rules of the tongue, there are many voices. There are many existences. There are many realities. In other words, what man is understanding with the activity of his thought and self-awareness, that it is the natural process of recognizing and seeing that you cannot see everything, and yet you can be among and present within the one experiential moment where all this conception begins. In other words, what happens is a lot of people who dive into concepts of nothingness. You hear a bit of Zen, and I remember Sadhguru. Sadhguru is this Indian mystic, yogi teacher, very wonderful man. And he said that you've heard a little bit of Zen, and you're following it, and you're getting confused because you're re-looking at your simple definitions, and it could be dangerous. And you see, it's not dangerous to look at your own philosophy of life again. Because once you look at it, you learn more, you don't lose that. That is the difference between the collective insight and the individual's insight. The individual is prevented by his own assumption of the veil. But the veil does not need to be assumed when there is direct experience and an option. So what is the greatest thing you can do for yourself is to eventually see, not think, but act in alignment with your direct experience. What that means is begin looking at yourself so directly you are seeing through yourself. And what you see when you are through yourself is you perceive how mankind is adjusted and presented to mankind. And you cannot show another man to another man and tell him you are the same. You say no. You are your own unique instrument, here to play your own unique sounds, here to say your own unique things. But in the understanding of the moment, all men are in a sense born equal. All men are conceived in equality because that equality is from a nothingness, from an unknown origin. In other words, the intelligence of our existence seems to be aware of its chaotic nature and hence allowing itself ignorantly to believe in order. But when all things are happening at once, what that means is that our experience means everything is happening at once. Our mentality means that everything is happening step by step. So in other words, the thinker has a different experience than the experiencer. Because the thinker is still thinking about thinking. What that means is that you're too absorbed by your attention having to be found in ideas. In other words, your sense of exploration you find requires the justification of your past. You see, the greatest human ability is the ability to receive the moment at its fullest. And the moment originates a lot of conceptions. Again, back to all men are born equal. No, all conceptions are born equal. Because we see that life is not a game of definitions. We see that it is not about echoes and the fading of understanding into different forms of understanding. It is their collective view. So my friends, I suggest and recommend very wholeheartedly that you perceive your journey into your own greater exploration as one of reunion. See what is attracting to you, and when it is perceived in the moment, there is reunion. What that means is that mankind at this point has a separate consideration of itself. And so reunion is your observance of your separation in any moment. You can observe the fact that you can be walking in heaven or hell, but who's tuning into the idea of heaven? Who is letting images dictate experiential reality? You see, you must not that you must not let playfulness is the son of compassion. And the son of compassion is always learning from its father. What that means is that when you begin acting playfully, you see there's no problem with sharing, with loving, with caring, with seeing infinite value within others. And when you say infinite value, in other words, you self-reflect. You don't say anything. You see that your presence is communicating. And guys, this is very important to say. Because once you become aware your presence is communicating, you don't need the immediate translation of words to make it slightly heavy. As in, I will tell you my cellular experience. The difference between me and I find a lot of people who are approaching these ideas that I'm approaching is that they're not maintaining a sense of natural, untouched being. What that means is that there's this woman who died, and her name was Maya Angelou. And I didn't know her that much. She wasn't meant to, in other words, she shared timeless wisdom. And in a sense, even though I did see her later in my life, like in my later 20s, I understood more about who she was. But you see that Maya Angelou said, it's okay. You need to forgive, you need to be kind to people, you need to do all that stuff. In other words, it's okay to be the Dalai Lama. It's okay to be the Dalai Lama around people. But you must understand there's a part of you that is working with a natural intelligence of knowing. It is not a voice. Because the problem with voices is that you're conceiving too solidly what must occur and what must be the truth. The truth is present both in dynamic states and in static states. In other words, you can see the truth to life in pure stillness and nothingness, and you can completely see the truth of life in pure, the opposite, nothingness, I guess. So you can see it in somethingness and in nothingness, and in a sense, remind yourself of the value that you knew about life before you even had a memory to even know that there was a seer. Resistance is always a creative endeavor. What that means that if you're feeling resistance in your life, it's because you're in a sense buying into it or tuning into it or aligning with it or simply seeing it. When I say you're aligning, back in the day when they said the planets align, they didn't mean like literally every planet aligns. Maybe they did, but in a sense they mean the right moment is found. In other words, you find all your planets aligned. You have that one moment of stillness in nature where the beads in your hands feel like planets in the scale of the depth that you can see yourself, allowing yourself to perceive. You see, guys, the truth seekers, and in a sense the truth speakers of now, are simply energy in which we are translating into our own understanding. So you must increase your own understanding. You must not continuously go into these classes and continuously write notes that are not relevant to you, because your attention is on the ideas that are relevant to you, and you need to look through a greater light. What that means is your journey does not need to stop by your belief that this is your interest. See, if you're present in the physical, there's still more things you need to observe about the physical. In a sense, you need to pay attention to this. You're giving this amount of choice. You're not given to manage the whole world. In a sense, you're consciously given an ability to recognize thoughts in the human form. And that is what we call self-awareness in a sense. Because we have not understood our practice. If our practice is understood through the wrong context, it will ignore so many dimensions of reality that the collective feels it's ignorant. Guys, 7 billion people here. How can we still not have solutions to our questions of the past? It is not because we need exquisite people. It is because people are organizing themselves to a valuation they don't need for this life. What that means is that when I'm speaking, I'm saying that you can choose to be the person you were told to be. But don't you want to be curious about what your own voice is? Don't you want to know how far your own eyes go? You see, guys, meditation is, in a sense, for some people, the last resort to their own longing and curiosity of understanding life. In other words, the questions you're getting, it's not, how would you feel if you asked a physics question and your, let's say, cousin always answered you about it, or not your cousin, let's say your parents always gave you answers for the questions of life. They didn't let you go explore outside. They were like, there's some crazy people here. It's crazy because some parents, especially I've noticed, parents who have surmounted, or they have an unbelievable amount of wealth. What that means is you're affecting how people around you are going to see life. And if you make it too juicy, that means that the value of you seeking to make $1 billion in a world where there's hungry people is equivalent of not paying attention to what's going on. It is your understanding of the self that suggests where you stand. This is important, guys. You need to take care of yourself, and you need to be gentle, calm, and compassionate with yourself. And in a self, let yourself reveal life. In other words, life throws questions at you which you feel you need to have answers to, but you don't. You haven't lived that long. Let's say you're a baby and they ask you what's life and death. Well, the baby has to first walk a bit. So that's not the question that's appropriate with it. So when we begin asking questions that are inappropriate because they're not attentive to the context, you feel like someone who's experienced how to drink water and people are telling you it's not like the way you experienced it. And that creates a dilemma. So the way the individual can merge with the collectivity at this point may make your original view feel inaccurate. In other words, let's say I come and tell you life is God, and you're constantly looking at God, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're seeing life is God. You see how pigeons have beautiful design, and their intelligence is based on another pattern, another flow. So in other words, a human being can recognize its scale of being compared to the being that is around him. So livelihood begins to be explored differently. You see, this world is really big. You could go to a lot of places, but this universe, this multiverse of experience and existence can be had any moment. You do not need to choose to remain in the darkness that you create because you think about stuff and you have beliefs based on structures of the past that are creating shadows. Don't interpret your truth, because sometimes you see that when you're trying to help someone else tell them the truth, you have gone into a mode where you are trying to convince them of accuracy, but their accuracy is not based on your experiences, it's based on their own. So I would not try to bash someone with my own information unless life is asking me to. So guys, you need to think about what questions, in other words, your path. Think about your path and your direction in regards to your experience, and see that the quality of your experience is being defined by voices of others. Listen, we have people, human beings, with the ability to duplicate things perfectly. When I see a 6-year-old child play symphonies that children have never played, I see the ability of the human being to adjust to any condition. So what is the human being is actually the presence that is continuing through all conditioning. It is based on, let's say, Darwin's truths that life is evolution and there's change. And there's change in form and there's still awareness. So you need to see what context you're looking at life. Because if you're looking at it from a very small context, you will not see big enough things to remember your ambitions. Your life process must not become one where your creativity and excitement is slapped away by other endeavors. Never be too busy for yourself. And that becomes a bit of self-honor, because if you're a human being who, based on survival reasons, you feel you're putting yourself in these conditions which you constantly want to get out of, what that means is not ignorance. You do not ignore one calling and try to hear another calling. It's the same voice. What that means is that life shows itself to you guys. Regardless of how much I speak, life shows itself. Life communicates in many ways. The human being is a multidimensional communication through this platform of existence which we call physical reality. The greatness that we can perceive is not in our shape. It is in our awareness of the unshaped. And we notice this. We notice our presence does not need to be commanded by physicality to remain in that awareness. Awareness is free. And because awareness is free, it is very hard for some people who are stuck to accept freedom of another texture. If you believe freedom is only found through the way you pronounce the symbol for God, you have perhaps lost hold of your bicycle steering wheel. And when I say bicycle, that means how you're observing duality. Because you see, if we measure a greater scale of change with a smaller scale of change, it would be as if the Son defining the Father. But when we allow ourselves to observe, in other words, I think the difference between a lot of mystics and meditators and I guess people who follow the analytical approach of rationality is that they're looking through different bodies. What that means is that the interest of the scientist has made his axioms based on his most immediate truth, which is the physicality of his body. The mystic is not so convinced, and this is where there are different convictions for practice of being. You see, before I meditate, I'm alive. Meditation is the interpretation of how my body is fluctuating in this energy spectrum that is just the potentials of life. You know, and I love mythology, I love stories, because you need stories to excite you. And what I mean at times, you need freedom from stories. And you realize your excitement's like, okay, wait a minute. If my first truth could be changed, then my other truths are changed. Then if my truths are changing instantaneously all the time, what is the truth? Maybe perhaps our frequency and our use of labels and language is the caveman's approach, and we need more than the caveman. We need the form of intelligence that is of the connectivity of existence. If mankind does not see itself connected with its reality, if it does not see that which looks in its eyes to be one with all, there's a sense of separation that keeps creating senses of separation. You don't want to be stuck in a lie where the lie is constantly creating more lies, so you're just stuck in this complex chain of lies. What that means is that when the guru, or we see in Zen masters, there were people who would slap you in the face, metaphorically, and tell you that, hey, don't lie to yourself. Hey, don't lie to yourself. How can you be so convinced of who you are? Because they're seeing more out of you. Because information communicates through different presentations, through the presence of both known ability and unknown ability. In other words, we all have a great understanding in known ability, things we can recognize, identify. But in a place where identification is not present, what eyes perceive? And those eyes, my friend, you can call it the third eye, you can call it anything, but it's a shapeless dimension in which your experience is being observant of all the different lenses that are your beliefs. So if you were a projector, what is in front of your eyes that is projecting this? And you see that on some degree it is physical reality. It is the design of the environment. So, man, it's all how the field is designed. You're learning how to play football based on the length and the measurements of the field. So if you're aligning your system of discovering yourself based on measurements of a system, all you can do is be a better player, because you're not the one creating the measurements. Find the creator of your measurements, and then you would be in a space, you would be in the presence of your own observance. And this is abstract. This is me riddling it out, I guess. Because you need to understand, it's not about language. If you're following my words as if I am giving you instructions, you will feel slightly alarmed and out of control. But I am not here giving you instructions. I am here, in a sense, extending and expanding your sense of awareness to your stories and self, because your self is affected by your stories. What is success? They ask people, and you realize success is commitment to self, commitment to image. So we see that when one is trying to be a billionaire, that isn't life being lived for a certain purpose. But what is that purpose bringing? Well, at the same time, we see that a lot of our life purposes might not be changing our meanings, might not be making us the perfect explorer, but they are teaching us something. So, whatever condition you are in life, it is information. And that which is a part of information excels the limitations of the physical body. And you can't put a puppet on your hand and tell yourself you can't see your hand. And that's what's happening. People are born into puppetry. You're born into being a puppet. You're born into seeing yourself with a certain face, with a certain name tag, with a certain concept. And so you realize the concept has an infinite ability to experience any context. You can have many ways of viewing what you're doing right now. My voice can be many interpretations if it's heard by 7 billion people. But we realize it's not about that, actually. It's about your own sense of honesty. Life brings you into moments. So you can see that in the 24 hours of your day, you're more aware to the things around you. You're more aware to what you need to do and the different changes in shape. Now, please observe your moment in which everything is coming to you. In other words, let your moment also be, it's okay, it's fine. Let your moment of experience be your eyes first. And what that means is, like, you close your eyes, you open your eyes, what you're seeing is your immediate awareness. It is what you can consciously work. So when the eyes open, when the senses are active, we realize this body of ourself is a multi-process thing. And for many processes, we can't come with definition. I mean, back in the day, they had polymaths. In other words, one person, Leonardo da Vinci, was able in many fields. But he was the sum of all of them, and perhaps even more, because the mind could compare. So Polymath is simply the collection of different categories. But you choose to categorize, so why create so many categories? In other words, I trust me, I have a very, in a sense, silent but admirable gaze towards the future of science. I like science. But you see that in answering certain questions, if the symbology is too much, you will not understand what I mean. If the value doesn't make sense, if one symbol doesn't make sense, you cannot see a greater symbol of awareness and resonance to yourself. Mankind is, in a sense, my friends, not ready to absorb its own truth. In other words, there needs to be more research done before we tackle existential questions, because we're answering them through different people. And when you see you're trying to find one answer to existence, in other words, let me tell you, let's say someone asked a question, and it was the question, what is the meaning of all existence? And I want to tell you, think about if you got the answer to that. How would you know? How would you know if Jesus walked up to you and said, I'm Jesus? How would you know if Buddha walked up to you and said, I'm Buddha? You know? How would you know the truth? See, the problem is not the shape of the truth. It is the fact there's so many shapes, so how can there be one truth? And we realize that they're all perceived over a greater category. So you see that you might be able to sometimes consciously shape the question, but the answer is the whole process. And when the answer is the whole process, you can't ask too many ridiculous questions, because life wouldn't make sense. So in a sense, people who perhaps might, in a very, I guess, misplaced value in their reality, is when they do not believe or know themselves to be a greater process, a greater being. You see, guys, human being is defined. The being aspect is undefinable because it's many layers and dimensions of experience and existence. So the mind of man that seeks freedom has, in a sense, simultaneously, when it has not given itself freedom, given itself the ability to observe freedom. Your problems, your chains, those chains you feel that are around your neck, which is unfairness, which is bad valuation, is based on your interpretation. It's based on an arrogance that I personally had, which I didn't recognize until every moment of my life. We are arrogant, and that's why we believe in the surface. We have not explored the inner realms of how consciousness behaves in many places, in many spaces. There's spaces of time, spaces and times I can't even communicate, because experiencing the space is accessing another mind, so you're not just limited to one experience. So we realize that it is the allowance in consciousness that enables you to even explore certain concepts. How you have created the foundations of your reality, how you perceive the columns of your rationality to be placed, suggests how observant you are of the irrational. Are you walking in this life only seeing the sane? Or are you not seeing the insane? Because insane, you can say, now, there is, in a sense, insanity, and there is sanity. And we realize that we are saying we're uncomfortable with insanity, we're comfortable with sanity, guys. So we want this kind of behavior. So we see that our acceptance of reality having to be in a certain way suggests that we are letting ourselves be molded. So many people go through many experiences in their lives where they realize that, wow, I have been molded, I have been shaped. And the reason they said be yourself was that I was never myself if I always thought I had to be someone. So if you realize that you need to always either accept that you are a dynamic process and your sense of presence is misunderstandable, or just tune everything down to a wavelength where one explanation can't explain everything. You see, we find our sense of certainty and explanations to be very limited when there are unknown factors. In other words, when we don't know, when there are unknown factors, you freak out and you can't ask a question, you want to see what's going on. When there's known factors, you get the arrogance of talking about life and trying to explaining it to another human being, but realizing that it is the holistic, it is the whole body, the whole presence of a human being that suggests the life they're living. So we can never communicate lives, we can communicate behaviors of the human form, and that inspires us. So in other words, when a specific point cannot see another specific point, it is only when the points begin to look at themselves that they see that a line is many points at the same time being acknowledged. So your understanding of conceptuality and conception must move towards not in a sense to do something, but to see that the understanding is present. You're observing life, and then the answer to your questions are present to you in the instant of their conception, because you are creating the ability to view the greater answer. Life is your attendance to your attendance. Do you see yourself here, or do you see yourself changing? And if you see yourself changing, you need to let it happen. And you need to breathe and know it is happening. And guys, the greatest gift when you have been waiting for a delivery your whole life is for someone to say, my friend, it's delivered. It's here with you. Stop thinking in the minds of a thinker and run free like the wind. And so, when we run free with the wind, we realize the value of our breath. We realize existence is lightning strikes of infinite openings of awareness and imagination constantly happening. What I'm saying is that once you have a certain level of mind, and then you are, in a sense, finding within yourself a requirement to constantly perceive your mind, to observe yourself. You see there are people who study life. And when they study life, they find their own solutions because they've asked their own questions. So you see, it's about the questions you ask in life that suggest the recognition you can have of the context of the answer. So you choose the fragility of your definitions. You choose how fragile your definitions are. You choose if words can break in an instant and all truths can crumble in the now moment, which is your presence of all that is. Or you can choose to segment it and categorize it and buy glitter from the store and tell yourself that life is pure happiness without acknowledging the destructive aspects. Do not just acknowledge your life's constructive aspects. You need to also be able to be observant to this, to observe your life's destructive actions. Because you see that you're contributing to many dualities. You're contributing to many realities. You're working with the minds of many. And in a world where there are 7 billion minds, 7 billion connections of self-awareness to existence, we find ourselves no longer lost, but found in the presence of a greater mind. In the fact that I am saying that we are agreeing on individuality, but there is no agreement on collectivity because we are the agreement. And that is when truth, very beautifully, has served to give it your life. Every belief you have is a candle. And the moment where that candle leaves and you see the emptiness in your ideas, you're found to be within a reality of a more able freedom. Do not be slaves to self-conceived illusion. And feel the eternity, the infinity of the life that you are. And tell me if your imagination has ends. Tell me if your imagination is a bottle I can look through, or that the endless was always a part of your gaze. That regardless of the eagle you thought, the white eagle you thought you were, and you constantly flew above many fields, you eventually understood the greatness of the space which you are an individual in, which you are separate in. And once separation is found to have been never separated, you have been reunited with your beloved. You have found the presence that is the greater sense of intelligence in your life. Because trust me, my friends, knowledge can be as much desirable as one's sexual cravings. Because you can get a thirst on knowledge, you can get turned on by having questions answered, but you're more than a process, and that is what life is teaching you. You are the holistic intelligence that is this moment of awareness to any separated process that can come into conception. And my friends, I want you to visualize your most incapable self and see that incapable self, and perhaps for the first time through my voice, see the instance before you made a decision to see an incapable self, and realize that time and space are always bowing to an honest heart. Life respects a kind and honest being. It affects your energy, it affects your intelligence, it affects your compassionate. It aligns your flows to what you feel is your truth. Your truth is the longing of the acts that you must do. But trust me, when Zeus reminds Hercules of where he has come from, one no longer believes in myth, but purpose becomes the action of the moment which you are always serving. And so smile, breathe, and go slowly in the naturally and in a sense very harmoniously aligned ability for you to recognize your truth in its complete form. And in a sense, I guess what Mr. Within could be saying to every voice out there is that you must be able to see more in yourself. You must be the deepest gaze of your own being. And if you are not, you must quickly become aware of to become an observance. Every moment you are a greater observance. And so do not find your hands empty in the emptiness of all physicality. You are present. And such presence needs no interpretation from limited senses of self. And then, my friend, your exploration of the limitless is always happening. As many great teachers have said before in many ways. Here and now and wow.
Yeah, that's reasonable, isn't it?
Thank you.